Hi, my name's Tammy. I am a friend of Bobby and Sarah. I met them when I was about 11 years old at a holiday Bible club in South Africa, and I don't think they were even engaged yet. So we've got a bit of history together, and it's been an interesting walk, and it's so nice that I've got to be able to share with you. I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal saviour at a music concert that was being given at school, and at the end of the show they shared the gospel, and I felt called to go and speak to the counsellors and pray for the first time. And there and then Jesus became my king, and I gave him my life. I had many expectations in high school, what life would be like as I grew older. Things have happened like that, but not in the way that I expected when I was a little girl. I guess it starts really when Kevin and I got married. We were married young. The first year of marriage was a difficult one. It was not helped by an early pregnancy. Kevin is a pilot. He was flying away to different parts of Zimbabwe. I was 19 weeks pregnant, and one night as I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, I realized that my waters had broken. I was terrified. I think Kevin was even more terrified. He likes to fix whatever's wrong, and he couldn't fix me. He took me to Kariba Hospital, which is a rural African hospital. There's not much in it. The doctor was there, but he didn't do anything. He didn't want to help medically, so I just lay there all night. The next day, Kevin flew me out of Kariba, and we landed back in Harare, and we went off to the hospital. My doctor didn't believe me that my waters had broken, and he sent me home. The next week or two I started some bleeding, and things didn't look right, so the doctor then put me on bed rest, and I was in hospital. Kevin had just gotten home from 2 weeks away when he came to visit me in the morning, and my pains had gotten bad, and the doctor told me that I was now in labour. I was 28 weeks pregnant, but I don't recall them trying to give me anything to stop the labour. And I then gave birth to this little boy, Matthew Aiden. He was only 900 grams, and he survived for 5 hours. I remember holding Matthew in hospital after he passed away. Kevin came to me, brought him to me, and we sat there and tried to memorize each little perfect part of his body. Those next few years were really difficult for Kevin and I. We were both hurting a lot. Kevin was given the brilliant opportunity of an airline job, and it was now international flying. So he would go to all parts of the world for 2 weeks and then come home for 10 days. It was at this juncture in our lives when I fell pregnant with our daughter, Deborah. She was born and she was perfect. She is still the happiest little thing I know, and she was a really, really easy child. In those 2 years after Deborah was born, the state of the country, Zimbabwe, really deteriorated. So we up and left and bought a house in Belito. Michael was born the year we moved into Belito, and I suddenly felt like I had been put in the deep end all over again. I felt totally inadequate, incapable. We did have friends around, which was great. But Kevin was now a captain in the airline, and he wasn't home as much as I would have liked. Deborah was 7 and Michael was 4 when we found out that we were going to have another baby. In the 12th week of pregnancy, we went for a scan and Kevin was away. So I decided to take Deborah and Michael with me to the doctors. They were really excited. I remember seeing the screen and, you know, those black and white ultrasound pictures, and there was a heartbeat, which I thought was a good sign, and you could see the head and 2 arms, and I could see the legs. And I thought, well, yay, look, baby brother or sister. And then I looked at the nurse, and she had tears streaming down her cheeks. She told me that the baby's brain measurements didn't look right, and there was something wrong, something big. She wanted me to go and see the doctor straight away, so I went in and he sat reading the report. He took his pen in his hand and he looked at me and said, "So, how's Wednesday for you, for the abortion?" My immediate reaction was, no, I'm not going to abort. My husband and I will not kill our own baby. And from then on, life kind of just shifted a gear. Nothing seemed real right then, and life would not be real for a while. Kevin got back from his trip away, and we went to go and see a couple of doctors. I guess second opinions. They all said pretty much the same thing. Why not just get it over and done with now? The doctors told us that if the pregnancy did carry on, it would probably only get to about 28 weeks, and then the baby would be stillborn. As the months went on, without any signs of the pregnancy having any complications, it actually got harder and harder to cope with. The further scans showed that our baby was going to have a severe cleft palate deformity. So that thing in the top of your mouth, that hard thing where your tongue goes, he wasn't going to have that. He wasn't going to have a nose, and he might only have one eye. I imagined horrible things. I felt like I was carrying an alien. We knew that we had to cope with what we were going through somehow, so we decided to find out the gender of the baby. We found out that we were going to have a baby boy, and we decided on the name James. I had remembered that we'd done a Bible study course at Bobby and Sarah's house on the book of James, and the first verse of that chapter came to mind. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And it was the trials that in that verse that really struck me. The church body really helped us through those times, and at that time the listening and the comforting is just what we needed. Eventually at the end of the pregnancy, so 40 weeks, James was still with us, and I was induced. He was quite comfortable where he was, so now it needed doing. After some hours of natural labour, James was born, and they passed him to me, and I held him in my arms, and I fell in love. And I needed to pass him over quickly to Kevin so that I wasn't being selfish with that time, and I remember handing him over so that Kevin could have some time with him as well. And Kevin had a fight with those doctors because they had taken the clipboard and written nil by mouth. They were going to order that James be starved to death. Kevin fought hard with those doctors, and eventually they agreed to give James a nasogastric tube, which would let us feed him. Without the cleft palate, with the cleft palate, he can't suck a normal bottle. So that was the only way we could give him anything to eat. The doctors were shocked and surprised that we were going to go and try and keep this going. It was 3 days after he'd been born that we were discharged from hospital. The doctors said that they couldn't do anything else, but we weren't to expect very much time. They said that he wouldn't survive the week. We then had to start life as a family back in the house. James was battling with seizures. He'd kind of like short circuit, and his brain doesn't have the right connections, so his seizures are quite prevalent. And yeah, a week turned into a month, turned into 3 months. When I was doing the research online, the oldest baby I had found with this abnormality was 9 months old. James then turned 1. James has been a blessing. It has been a surprise, and every day we are grateful for. In these past 7 years, I've been amazed at how people have reacted when they meet James. I admit that when I first brought him home, I was scared of how other people would react. Would his brother and sister be ridiculed for their weird-looking brother? Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. Michael was at nursery school when James was first born, and I remember going to fetch him from school, and all the kids would come running around and trying to peer into the bassinet, and they'd look at me and go, "What happened to his face?" And I'd think, "Ooh, how do I explain this to a 4-year-old?" But their question was, what happened to his face? Why has he got a plaster? Now obviously that plaster is there to hold his tube in, his feeding tube. But all they could see was that he must have a sore, because when they have a plaster, it's because they've hurt themselves. They wanted to know what this little boy had been doing that would hurt his cheek like that. Teenagers now, when I'm at the high school, they come to me and they look at James with such love. They come and hold his hand, they take photographs, and they want to take these photographs home to show their mum and dad. Adults look into James's eyes, and I can see the love and the compassion that they feel towards him. I do occasionally wonder why. How can this little guy, who cannot talk, he cannot hug, he can't even make eye contact, how can he move people's hearts in such a way? Just everybody loves him. This is unconditional love, and when people feel it, it touches them, and it makes them appreciate life. Not just James's life, but their own lives. I remember when James was about 1 year old, I was at school pickup time in a car park, and a grandmother came over to the car and wanted to know the story of James. So I shared with her the basic summary of what I've just told you, and she looked at me with tears streaming down her cheeks. She then shared with me that she had been planning to commit suicide. She had put everything in order for her life, and she'd chosen her day and her way that she was going to commit suicide. But after meeting James and seeing what a little blessing he is, she realized that she couldn't do that. She couldn't take her own life. A friend of mine told me about another story. She'd shared James's story with a teenage girl. That teenage girl had an unwanted pregnancy, and she was planning an abortion. After hearing James's story, she decided to keep that little baby. And now I guess that baby's probably about 6 years old. How can James's life have a purpose? How can he touch so many people? And how can his life have a meaning? I ask you, if this little guy can impact the world in the way that he has, how much more of a purpose do you have? You, with your able body, your creative mind, your sharp wit, and your fabulous sense of humor. Look at James and his abnormality. It has purpose. Do you really want to be just normal? Whatever you're dealing with right now, the problem that you think is going to smother the breath right out of you, just remember you're not alone. Christ has a way of getting us through our trials. He can carry us, He can hold us, and He can comfort us. I really wish we would stop trying to hide our challenges from each other. If we could be real people, if we could be real with our friends, with our family, and stop trying to be perfect, then maybe none of us would feel as abnormal as we do.